My starting point is the question that has been asked in this conference before, which is how to take the inner work out. And when I was a graduate student in literature, before I became a therapist, I studied alchemy for a bit. And one of the things that really was puzzling to me about alchemy is that I'd read Carl Jung, and it was very, very clear to me that these beautiful symbols and practices were spiritual practices, were meditations of the soul, designed to bring about a state of enlightenment. And these same writings by these same guys who were clearly mystics, when you go back and you read the histories, these same people who were writing these gorgeous metaphors were doing things like discovering barium and lithium and elements, and it didn't make sense to me. Like, why would the creators of this beautiful poetic metaphor be fooled by their own metaphor and fucking around with test tubes and shit? It didn't make any sense to me. For about a year, and I kept trying to figure it out and reading people on it, and nobody could explain it. And then it sort of got through to me that in the medieval world, which in some ways was smarter than ours, there was no distinction between inside and outside. So here's the question: how do we bring the inside out? And in the alchemical world, there is no distinction between inside and out. This is true. This is concrete. The alchemists believed that if a person were to do the deep spiritual work and to attain an internal sense through meditation and contemplation and union of opposites, of a place of enlightenment, that third place, that this person would, by definition, the minute that happened, be able to turn lead into gold, right there, concretely in front of your eyes. And conversely, if some old funky scientist was in the background and he was messing with all this stuff, didn't do any contemplation at all, but that would be impossible because this was contemplation, and found a way to turn lead into gold, he would in that moment become fully realized. There was no distinction. There was no distinction between technology, hear this, between your effect in the world and you. There was no distinction between your consciousness and your actions. They were one and the same thing. So, here's the question: how do we bring the inside out? Now, flip the frame. Let's talk psychology for a minute. I want to go back to where we were with grandiosity and shame. I wish I had a blackboard, but I'll just be a blackboard. So, in your mind's eye, picture me writing on a blackboard, and there's one line that goes, one line above, and then we're going to do one line below, okay? So, let's do shame. Well, let me go back. So my work with men for the last 20 years has been trying to find a way to hold what I would now call the defenses of covert depression, the drinking, drugging, yelling, screaming, going better than, whatever, to hold that and stop it, to be a container, really, because those parts of men lack that containment, and at the same time hold a man with love in the same time. Now, how did I figure out how to do that, or how did that come to me? So, one of the key places where I got help with that was a woman named Pia Melody, who is not to be confused with Melody Beatty, but she's a wonderful woman who works with trauma and inner child. She's one of the creators of all that, 12-step person. And Pia's got about 6 really great ideas, and one real jaw-dropping idea for me as a therapist was the following. There's not one kind of abuse, there's 2. One kind of abuse, which is the trauma or abuse we normally think of, she calls disempowering abuse. It's the one we all know about. It's making a child feel shamed, bad. It's what you were describing with your father, making it feel like a piece of shit. The other form of abuse she calls false empowerment. False empowerment. A false empowerment is pumping a child up, or at the very least, not checking a child's natural grandiosity. And I have 2 boys, and I must tell you, I check their grandiosity on a daily basis. It's really hard. You know what I mean? My little son has a play date, and some other kid comes over and he says, "You want to play ping pong? You want to play ping pong? You want to play ping pong? You want to play ping pong?" And then at the end of the play date, he says, "I don't think that guy liked me." Duh. And I have to teach him, like I am that father becoming the superego saying, "Son, this is how you get along. You have to say, what would you like to do? You can't just jump it down his throat. Or you can do that if you want, but he won't come back." I have to teach him that. That's my job. That is being the container for his narcissism, container for that grandiosity. And I have to tell you, as somebody who consults to a lot of psychiatric units with really bad acting out adolescents, what comes up for me all the time is that these boys have been abandoned. And no one has checked their grandiosity, and they're out of control. Because the father isn't there, and the mother's disempowered, and won't stand up to him. And so they just go wild. That's, sibling. That Robert talked very, at a cultural level, about that happening in a broad way. But anyway, so here's the template. It goes like this. Okay, you have shame. What shame leads you to, you have disempowerment. Being told you're bad, being hit, being made to feel small. By the by, a child can be disempowered actively, "You're a shit, let me hit you," or passively, "Hi, Dad, I'm home. Well, let me just have this martini and I'll talk to you." Could be either. It could be abandonment or it could be active. Anyway, you have disempowerment. Disempowerment leads to shame. Shame leads to difficulties with yourself, difficulties in your relationship to yourself. You feel like shit about yourself. And it pulls you into the victim position. Okay? Disempowerment, shame, difficulties with self, victim. Now on this top line, you have false empowerment. False empowerment pulls you into grandiosity. When you're in a grandiose position, you feel fine about yourself. You're just making everybody around you sick. Like that guy with the cigar in the elevator. So you don't have difficulties with yourself, you have difficulty with others. And it sets you up to be in the offender position or the irresponsible position. See how that works? So here's how it goes. If I can put a gender thing on it, gender spin. Women in this culture tend to be dealing with disempowerment. Now dig this. Men in this culture are subject to alternations between the two. Back and forth. Shame, grandiosity. Better than, less than. Better than, less than.
The women are subject to disempowerment, but the men are subject to disempowerment plus grandiosity.
Alternations between the two.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the gifts I want to bring to the women, because women think, this is partly why there's a disconnect between them and us. The women's movement thinks that women are subject to shame, and that we're subject to grandiosity. They don't get that we're subject to alternations between the two. That's one of my gifts to them. So what this sets up is what I call conditional grandiosity. My friend Pia calls it the slave god.
What?
The slave god. The slave god is really clear in a dysfunctional family. There are guys I was speaking to, and I want to call on some of them. Who was the guy I was speaking to about his mom, his enmeshing mom? Is he here? Mark. There you are. Can I do this? Can I share this? Yeah. All right. So Mark was telling me about how he had a very, very manipulative mother who would go to almost any lengths to get between him and his father, like threatened suicide, right? And how he had been sucked into the mother's vortex as the mother's confidant. And we call that sexual emotional incest. Emotional incest. At any rate, I want to get back to that. But that is a really clear example of what I mean by being the slave god. The slave god is the special one in a dysfunctional family who has inordinate power inside the family, but it is only based on his abdication of his real needs. Real needs. Got that? Now this is what I want to tell you. Listen to this again. You have inordinate power inside the system, but it is only based on the abdication of your real needs. Guess what? There's a short word for that. You know what it's called? Manhood. This is the way, this is the role of masculinity in this culture. You have inordinate power, but it's predicated on your abdicating your true needs. Give up, resign, turn your back on, not claim. You don't have the right. You don't have the right to your own needs. But if you're willing to play the game, get on the conveyor belt, put on your straitjacket, go to work, then you get privilege. Now, there's an old myth about this that I like really a lot that really puts this right on the money. It's called the story of Faust. Faust sells his soul for worlds of power and knowledge. Okay, so now let me talk about healthy self-esteem. Is an internal sense, it's a spiritual sense of well-being. It's a feeling of I am enough and I matter, not because of what I can do or because of what I have, but simply because I'm here. I showed up, I'm breathing. And my worth and mattering is no greater and no lesser to the guy to the left, the guy to the right of me. That's healthy self-esteem. It's from inside, and it is same as. Unhealthy esteem is going better than into that grandiosity or less than into that shame. So as I was doing it yesterday, as I go through my day, I've learned, I've been doing this for about 10 years, I monitor myself, and I watch myself go up in the judgment. And I do some breathing, and I use an affirmation, and I come back down. And I watch myself go down to shame. I do some breathing, I do an affirmation, and I pull myself back up. And I've been doing this for it's like building muscles. And that is one example of what I mean by learning the art or the discipline of relationship and intimacy, because I'm learning about being intimate with me and intimate with you. I cannot be intimate with you if I'm judging you or feeling like you're judging me. Now that's where the inside work, I think we're going to take questions at the end, so that's where the inside work and the outside work are one work. Here it is. The alchemist had no distinction between the relationship between what was inside and what was outside. Say it again. There was no distinction in the relationship between what was inside and what was outside. Our spiritual work is in relationship. It's in the world. It's right here. I'll tell you a story. It's a great story. So as I was writing the book, there was a period when I was really hot and the energy was really flowing right through me. And I went to my teacher, my guru, Zen master, George. It's about as exotic as I can get, George. So I went to George, who truly is a Zen master. He was in a monastery for 17 years, and he's there. And I said, so we sat for a while, and George said, so what's happening with your life? And I said, okay, George, this is what's happening. I am staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning, night after night. I can't believe the energy that's flowing through me. I really feel like I've got it knocked about how men are constructed in this culture, the roots of violence, and how to bring peace and relationship to men across the planet. What do you think from a spiritual perspective? And George said, how have you been treating your wife? It's right here. I'll tell you another story, same story. I used to do Sufi dancing. I used to be a dervish. It was very moving for me to do that last night. And I did it for 15 years. And the man who taught me was from Turkey. And I was just learning. You learn, there's a nail in the ground and you turn on it. And the story goes that one of my teachers, a woman, it didn't happen to me, but it's a wonderful story. A woman was turning, and she got into an ecstasy state, which is very easy to do when you turn. And this guy, the teacher, walked over to her, and he said, and he could tell she was drifting off, and he said, where are you? And she said, I'm with God. And he said, oh, you know where God is? And she said, no. And he slapped her. Not that hard, but he slapped her. And he said, there. There. See, we're very choosy about what we want to be spiritual with, aren't we? I can be real spiritual when things are happening my way. And that's it. That's it. That's the whole ball of wax right there. Robert said, now I want you to tell these guys how to make covert depression overt. Well, it's not that hard, really. It's all too easy. It's right there. So what I teach is I teach the art of relationship. And this is where the psychological and the spiritual meet, because what is spirituality? It's intimacy. We were talking about that, right? Spirits, being intimate with spirits. What is spirituality but showing up and being there with what's in front of your face, being fully there with what's there? That's what it is. It's intimacy. What is the love that has happened over this weekend in this room? Pia taught me this. It goes like this. When a human being brings forth his or her full humanity, which is a rare thing in this culture, when somebody speaks the whole truth about themselves, and that truth is met not by judgment or shame, but by a simple embrace, that's intimacy. And that's a healing moment, and that's a spiritual encounter right there. And it doesn't have to be with another human being. Martina's really taught me that this weekend. It could be with a spirit, it could be with a tree, it could be with this is art. This is where art comes in. Because it's not you, and it's not you. It's you in cooperation with what's moving through you and what's in your face. See? That's intimacy. And if you're all fucked up going into shame or going into grandiosity, or really being about shame but hiding it through grandiosity, or feeling inadequate and then projecting it on somebody else, or running away because you're going to be attacked, or shutting off, or doing all this bullshit, all of that is an obstruction to your intimacy, which is an obstruction to your community and an obstruction to your own spiritual development. So when I talk about relationship, I mean all the way down. All the way down. And the beauty about working on this is it will come get you. You don't have to find it. It will be in your face. Now, I want to say one other thing to balance something, because I want to put this out, just like I'm putting stuff out to the women, I want to put some stuff out to the men, which may seem odd to hear at first, but here's the thing. Now, I want to get back to Mark. Now, when Mark's mother was sucking the lifeblood out of him that way, and his father was distant and passive, what that did to him is it set him up to put up a lot of walls and to be distant, right? Because his reading of what intimacy is to be sucked dry, so he's going to protect himself. That's the damage that he did. Thank you for letting me share that. Now, it's easy to say about this that what this is about is too little father and too much mother. That's the easy way of saying it. Ready? That's not right. Now let me get it a little more nuanced for you from my perspective. Because we talked about it, Mark said, I was too close to my mother. And I said, you weren't close to your mother at all. Enmeshment is not closeness. Closeness is about a parent. Closeness between peers is about two people who respect each other, who are feeding each other in a mutual way. Closeness between a parent and a child, either a mother or a father, is about the energy of the parent going into the child and holding that child up. So this is about how his damage prevents him from being spiritual and intimate with this woman. And, it's easy to sort of blame the woman, but you got to get real about this. This is a person he's going to go to bed with and wake up with every day for the rest of his life. So it's in everybody's interest that this gets square. Now, what square means is increased intimacy. The heroic move for him, which we talked about, is understanding that it wasn't that his mother was close and he has to defend against closeness. It's that his mother was devouring and draining and not close. His mother abandoned him. There was no him there. His mother wasn't interested in his needs, saw him as a person to be tended to. That's not closeness. That's abandonment. It looks like closeness. So now when his wife, we're going to take questions in the end, hold on. When his wife comes up to him with his demand, his move, of course, is to fuck you and the horse you rode in on, right? But his healing move, which I call baring your neck to the tiger, I actually say that. His healing move is to say, okay, what do you want? Or, I'm feeling really demanded on right now. Could you say that in a different way? Or, okay, I'll give you these 3 things, but I'm not going to give you the other 14 things. But whatever it is, it's still connected. There's no rupture. I don't like what you're doing with me right now. Whatever it is, I'm not talking about some Pollyanna, conflict-free bullshit. I'm talking about staying connected. You can stay connected from a warrior, stand up for yourself. I have to do that with my wife all the time. I really do. I have to say, just the other day, I hope you didn't listen to this. Just the other day, we came back from a month's vacation, like this. We were in the woods, and we came back, she started slamming into this stuff, which she can get into, You're off having this great life, and I'm stuck with the kids, and I'm working too hard, and blah. Basically, I'm miserable, and it's your fault. Anybody else ever hear this? I'm miserable, and it's your fault, right? And I looked at her, honest to God, I looked at her, and I said, Belinda. She said, yes. I said, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. I had to do that. I'm leaving. It's too painful for me to go from a month of bliss to this bullshit in 3 days. I am leaving. And she looked at me and she knew I meant it. And she burst into tears. And we had a really raggedy day. It was really, and our kids were watching. But you have to stand up. You stand up, it hurts. This is no bullshit. But it's not about that she's the enemy. She has to stand up to me too. There was a time in our marriage where I was like cracking up cars and not paying the bills, and I was writing. I was the artist. Leave me the fuck alone, And she dropped the same thing on me. She grabbed me into a couples therapist and she said, "Straighten out or I'm leaving." So that's okay. That's part of the deal. So one last thing, which is this, because I must be running out of time. How much time is it? Okay, one last thing, which is this. The whole point of masculinity, as it's degraded in this culture, is that our self-esteem rides on being better than. Better than. Our self-esteem rides, I call it performance-based esteem. We do not have esteem by simply sitting here and being who we are. We have to go out and kill some fucking dragons and earn it. Now, there's an intrinsic paradox in resting your self-esteem on being a competitive winner. How can you join and feel a member of something if you're beating them? So when I talk about deconstructing masculinity or becoming a different kind of man, I am talking about stepping off of that whole thing, opening up your heart, daring to be vulnerable, daring to not make whoever it is that's giving you grief the enemy, and understanding that in the dark places and the tense places and the difficult places, that's just where the work is. I say this to the couples I work with, and I'm going to, one thing else. The couples I work with, I say, any fool, it goes like this: when your partner or whoever it is behaving well and you behave well back, that's like riding a bicycle downhill. It's really fun. It's a nice workout, but what the hell? When your partner, whoever it is behaving like a complete lunatic, and you can hunker down and answer that immoderateness with moderateness, that is like riding uphill. It really hurts, but it builds good muscle. All right. Can I just read this one thing? So here's a poem. Stanza from Rumi, and then I'm done. And it's about this. In your light, I learn how to love. In your beauty, how to make poems. You dance inside my chest when no one sees you, but sometimes I do. And that sight becomes this art. Thank you.